This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
World leaders set to give virtual speeches at the General Assembly as the UN marks its 75th anniversary. Oil production and export is expected to resume in Libya amid concerns over sharing of revenue among different factions. And why the Sahel is among the most vulnerable regions as climate change continues to cause havoc across the world. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Ethiopia commends the successful construction and operation of the standard gauge railway through Djibouti. And we look at efforts to revive Egypt's tourism sector amid fears of a slump in international arrivals. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. I'm Richard Nta. So good to have you with us. Let's begin where the UN is celebrating its 75th anniversary at the General Assembly session with speeches from world leaders as well as Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The event is a little different this year as summits will take place online. Nta reports from New York.
As they say, the show must go on, pandemic or no pandemic. World leaders won't be traveling here to address the world in a packed United Nations General Assembly Hall. Instead, their big speeches, the key events of this annual meeting of nations, will be recorded and then the video cast from UN headquarters. Now, summits will also be taking place online and meetings through live video apps as they have for months since the coronavirus pandemic emerged here. Now, this, of course, severely limits direct diplomacy from taking place in sideline meetings and bilateral meetings, in behind-the-scenes negotiations, as well as high-level luncheons that take place usually in any UN General Assembly high-level week. But it doesn't mean the world's pressing challenges will be ignored. On Monday, the UN will kick off celebrations for its 75th anniversary with a day-long commemoration event. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is using this occasion to adopt a declaration in which world leaders recommit to multilateralism. And that will be the overarching theme of the high-level week at a time when multilateralism is under threat and amid a rise in populism as well as unilateralism. Now, in focus will be the United States, which has dramatically distanced itself from international cooperation on key issues like climate change and also withdrawn from major United Nations agencies like the UN Human Rights Council and is working to pull out of the World Health Organization in the midst of this pandemic. The US president last year famously said in his speech that the future does not belong to globalists, but to patriots. We expect he will dig in on this point this year when he is among the first leaders to deliver pre-recorded remarks. Now, as a counterpoint, we anticipate speeches by China's leader Xi Jinping and other European leaders to defend and support multilateralism and international cooperation in order to address these pressing global issues. We are also on the lookout for two key developments out of this high-level week. The UN Secretary General's desire for combatants in conflicts around the world to commit to a global ceasefire so all the world can focus on tackling the coronavirus pandemic, as well as global efforts to find a vaccine and make it available and accessible to everyone. Also on the agenda, high-level events on fighting climate change and protecting biodiversity, as well as a women's rights summit and the elimination of nuclear weapons. Nta, CGTN, New York.
Well, CGTN sat down with the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, who reflected on the world's body's biggest accomplishments.
The UN is 75 years old. It's time to take stock and reflect. How would you evaluate the UN's contribution to the world thus far?
Well, I think that we must recognize that this period of 75 years is probably the only period in the history of humankind where the big powers had not wars among them. We have many conflicts around the world, but not a conflict like the Second World War or the First World War or the Napoleonic Wars or others that we had in the past. On the other hand, I think we can be very proud of the work of the UN peacekeepers, and they have saved a huge number of lives. They have contributed for countries that were at war to become countries in peace. And the UN has a fantastic role in humanitarian aid. Half of the international humanitarian aid is channeled through the UN agencies. The work these people do, sometimes in the most dangerous areas of the world, in the most dramatic situations, is something we can be very proud of. The UN was able to bring together the countries of the world, both in relation to the Agenda 2030, with the program of eradication of poverty, the program that is today a global program for sustainable and inclusive development, the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN was able to bring together countries for the Paris Agreement on climate change. So there are many positive things, but at the same time, we live in a world where, unfortunately, there is not enough international cooperation. We live in a world where there are too many divisions. And we just had the COVID-19. It is a virus, a microscopic thing, and it has put us on our knees. Why? Because the world was not able to come together to fight it, because there were divisions. And this is my biggest frustration.
CGTN's Lindy Mtongana spoke to Paul Ejime, an international affairs expert based in Nigeria, for more perspective on what Africa will be expecting from the United Nations General Assembly.
If we go into the individual cases, for instance, in peace and security, it has, for instance, mission in Mali at the moment. It has had missions in Liberia and Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea-Bissau, and then even, in the East Africa, in Southern Africa, particularly in West Africa, which has been very restive. The UN has been present, even over present, if you like. But there is also, remember, in Burundi, yes, Rwanda of 1994. Remember that UN was there, but didn't stop the genocide. Those are the downsides. And then the fact that in Mali, they have about 15,000 UN forces, but they are not able to stop soldiers from taking power. So it's been a mixed bag. And there have been issues, remember also some African, I think virtually every African country is a member. And then they are paying their dues, and then UN is supposed to be helping to bring peace, international peace. How, like I said, how successful that has been is a matter of from where you are looking at it. It's, for me, it's a mixed bag. And it's been headed by two Africans, Brutus Gali and then Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan, 10 years. I think those are the areas where Africans have also made their impact at the leadership of UN. Just like UN has deployed some resources, personnel, and then capital to do its mandate on the African continent.
And so let's look to the future, Paul. Looking to the future then, what should the key priorities for African countries be as they approach this upcoming UN General Assembly?
Well, it should be to maximize their membership. For instance, there's been talk about, the impact. There are countries that are so-called permanent members who wield veto powers. I think Africa, with its population, should also be given a chance, maybe to have a permanent membership at the UN Security Council, not just this non-permanent membership of every 2 years, and also reforms that can make sure that Africa is able to optimize its membership in terms of what it brings to the table and what it takes out, given its population, some 54 members, African countries. I think it's a number that should be reckoned with, both not in numerical strength, but in terms of what it brings to the continent by way of the dividends, the benefits of belonging to such a big organization.
Yes,
I
indeed.
think that is the way. And then look at issues of democracy, of economic empowerment. There are, UN agencies that should do what they have to do to assist Africa in agriculture, in economic development, and then social, health, and all that. I know they are doing that, but even gold requires some shining.
Yes.
Everything, no matter how beautiful, needs some improvement.
Since 2011, the U.S. government has been helping to fight insurgent group al-Shabaab in Somalia. By using warplanes, the U.S. has eliminated several high-profile terrorists, including group leader Ahmed Abdi Godane. According to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, the U.S. made a minimum of 202 strikes in Somalia between 2004 and 2020. The continuous increase of drone attacks in al-Shabaab-controlled areas have reportedly killed and displaced many civilians.
I was displaced by the drone strikes from number 50 village in Lower Shabelle region. The drone attacks became another challenge we faced, apart from the clan clashes and flash floods from the river.
Well, the U.S. Africa Command has rarely confirmed any civilian casualties in Somalia. Analysts believe that the Somali government should do much more to secure the country.
The problem in Somalia is not about drones taking off from Djibouti, Addis Ababa and Nairobi that carry out attacks in the country, but the real challenge is there no effective government that has the power to control its airspace, land and sea borders.
Let's turn our attention to North Africa, where one of the continent's longest-running conflicts is still a major international concern. Libya is preparing to resume oil production, but concerns have been raised over who supervises its export and how to ensure oil revenue will be divided equally among different factions. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
Libya has high-priced light crude oil, and it has been a factor in its civil war. Rival forces split between East and West have been butting heads for control of oil revenues. Eastern tribes loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar first seized control of key oil fields in January. A blockade has also prevented crude exports from leaving the country's ports. Haftar now says his forces will allow the Libyan oil facilities to resume operations and exports, but with conditions that ensure a fair distribution of revenue.
The decision was clear and very important, as it addressed all the demands of the Libyan people, which are fairness in distribution of revenues and not to waste oil resources on war.
Politicians in the country consider the move by Haftar as a way to find a comprehensive Libyan consensus.
All of the revenue coming from oil will be deposited in banks at the control of the entire Libyan people, so that it will be disposed of later. I mean by later, that we hope that there will be a single and unified Libyan government that looks after the interests of all Libyans.
Before the blockade, Libya produced 1.2 million barrels of oil a day. For the National Oil Corporation based in Tripoli, the suspension of oil exports has cost almost $10 billion in revenue, and it has led to nationwide fuel shortages. The resumption of oil production could help revive the economy and improve living conditions for citizens. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. Reprieve for popular Chinese-owned app after a federal judge blocks the U.S. government's ban on WeChat. And why the Sahel is among the most vulnerable regions as climate change continues to cause havoc across the world.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent, to bring you the untold stories, Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Djibouti, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Search and rescue operations continue in western India after a three-story residential building collapsed early Monday. At least 10 people have been killed while up to 25 people are feared trapped. The cause of the collapse remains unknown, but authorities said the building had been identified as a dangerous structure prior to the incident and that a notice for it to be vacated had been issued. A U.S. federal judge has blocked the U.S. government's ban on WeChat, citing free speech in her ruling. The popular Chinese-owned messaging and e-commerce app was scheduled to stop operating in the U.S. on Sunday. This reprieve comes just after TikTok announced a deal with American companies on its U.S. operations. Toby Muse reports.
Judge Laurel Beeler said a lawsuit launched by a collective of WeChat users could have merit, especially in terms of possible restrictions on freedom of speech and also claims of hardship to users of the app. This order by the judge also prevents the government from restricting infrastructure companies from carrying WeChat's internet traffic. The ban was supposed to go into effect Sunday. Officials from the U.S. Commerce Department had said in a call to reporters earlier this week that they anticipated a long legal fight to try to curb WeChat's presence here in the United States. The app TikTok had also been slated to be banned from being downloaded in the United States until the surprise deal announced Saturday. As part of the new deal, software giant Oracle, TikTok and Walmart will create something called TikTok Global, which will be based in the United States. Oracle will look after all of US user data and safeguard TikTok's computer systems. The two US companies will hold a 20% stake in TikTok Global. ByteDance will hold the remaining 80%. In announcing the deal, President Donald Trump said that his previous concerns over security of the app had been reassured now that TikTok Global will be based in the United States.
All of the technology will be maintained here. They're going to move into the United States, which is what's important. They're going to move it to the United States. Unbelievable company. They're going to have 25,000 jobs. If it all goes, I gave them the preliminary approval.
To give an idea of just how chaotic these last-minute negotiations have been, as part of the deal, TikTok Global will make a $5 billion donation to an education fund. TikTok said on Sunday that the first it heard about this donation was from news reports of the deal. Still, in a statement, TikTok said it was looking forward to investing in educational projects across the world. Toby Muse reporting for CGTN, Arlington, Virginia.
WeChat developer Tencent has released a statement saying it has been and will continue to negotiate with the U.S. government and other U.S. stakeholders to reach a long-term solution. The company says it is also further evaluating the impact of the ban. WeChat has over 1 billion users worldwide, and analytics firms Apptopia's data shows in early August, WeChat had an average of 19 million daily active users in the U.S. It's popular among Chinese students, expats, and some Americans who have personal or business relationships in China. The Sahel, a largely semi-arid region that cuts across several African countries, is on the front line of climate change effects. Now, experts say its extreme vulnerability to drought and shifting rainfall patterns is ratcheting up problems of poverty, population pressure, and jihadist violence. The UN also warns that millions of people are in a state of acute food insecurity.
Since the start of the Industrial Revolution, global temperatures have been rising. That's according to a United Nations report in September. But this average warming is said to be 50% greater in the Sahel. The region has suffered a combination of droughts and floods. In Mauritania, these extreme events are having far-reaching consequences.
The roads were flooded. There are no more taxis. People are no longer able to reach their workplace. We are there, sitting, doing nothing.
Here, look at the water. This is the water that came to our door and entered our room. The state must find a solution to the water. This year, a lot of water has fallen here.
These climate conditions have sparked a massive rural exodus. Jihadist groups have been taking advantage of this to enlarge their areas of influence. Food insecurity is also said to intensify. The UN has warned that agricultural yields will continue to fall in some parts of the region. Surging population growth in the western countries of the Sahel may turn an already bad situation even worse. Despite these challenges, experts say the future of the Sahel looks promising. People in the Sahel have taken matters into their own hands. Tens of thousands of farmers and fishermen have enhanced their resilience to climate change. In February this year, 17 Sahel countries set down a plan to invest $400 billion in fighting climate change by 2030. Part of the plan is investing in projects to limit greenhouse gas emissions and help adaptation to climate change. Cham Hono, CGTN.
Well, a new report by charity organization Oxfam titled, quote, "Confronting Carbon Inequality," close quote, says the richest 1% of the world's population are responsible for more than twice as much as carbon pollution as the 3.1 billion people who make up the poorest half of humanity during a critical 25-year period of unprecedented emissions growth. Now, for more on this, we are now joined by Alvin Muniasia, the Food Security and Climate Justice Advisor at Oxfam. Mr. Alvin Muniasia, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Let me begin by asking you, what is the significance of this Oxfam report?
Thank you. Oxfam's mission is to achieve a just world without poverty, and Oxfam, in partnership with Stockholm Environmental Institute, through this report, reveals the extreme carbon inequality in recent decades that has driven the world to a climate brink from the periods of 1990 to 2015, with annual emissions growing to the level of 60%. And it also sets out how governments must use this historic juncture to build fairer economies within the limits our planet can bear. It exposes the consumption of wealthy minority, which are fueling the climate crisis and causing poor communities, and especially young people are paying the price of this particular catastrophe. The extreme carbon inequality is a direct consequence of our government's decades-long pursuit to the grossly unequal and carbon-intensive economic growth.
All right, Alvin, thank you for bringing all of that there to light. I guess the question that really needs to be asked is what needs to be done to counter the adverse effects of carbon pollution cited in the report?
First of all, governments must curb the emissions of the wealthy through taxation and bans on luxury carbon objects like sports utility vehicles and frequent flights, with revenues invested in public services and low carbon sectors to create jobs and help end poverty. it is also a personal and individual responsibility where we can all make a difference through our own choices where possible. And for example, using public transport or switching cars, carpooling, but not every individual has these options and privileges, because of the big systemic changes that needs to be put in place to cut emissions through delivery by coming up with government policies on the same. Governments must also introduce taxes and bans, on luxury carbon consumption, such as frequent flights or SUVs, to curb the emissions of the wealthy. We must invest in low carbon public transport, electric transport, digital infrastructure to make it easier and cheaper for people to cut their emissions. All this needs to happen in order to shift our energy supplies from fossil fuels to renewables and reversing the already devastating deforestation and cutting emissions from other greenhouse gas emissions such as methane or nitrous oxide associated with intensive and industrial agriculture.
All right, Alvin, those are some very important points that you've made there. My final question before I let you go, let's talk accountability. Now, the Oxfam report warns of the risk of the remaining carbon budget for 1.5 degrees Celsius being entirely depleted by 2030. How can rich nations be held more accountable to address this threat?
We have no time to waste, and if emissions do not fall year on year and carbon inequality is not addressed or it is left unchecked, the remaining carbon budget for the 1.5 degrees Celsius will entirely be depleted by 2030. I'm worried about this. If government fails to act, the richest 10% would blow the carbon budget by 2033, even if all other emissions were cut to zero. So what needs to happen is that we need a just transition to a much more fairer, more sustainable economies. No one should be left behind post-COVID. Workers in polluting industries should have a real say in the decisions that affect their livelihoods directly. And governments should support them through training and the creation of new green jobs with decent job guarantees wherever possible. And in low carbon sectors like renewable energy, energy efficiency, health and social care. That is the primary direction and trajectory that governments should take going forward.
All right, Alvin Muniaja, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Thank you for speaking to us. Alvin Muniaja breaking it all down for us. He's the Food and Security Justice Advisor at Oxfam. All right, we continue our special coverage of amazing Xinjiang. Our team of reporters is now in Zhaosu County, and later in the evening, they'll head to Tekis County. Zhaosu County is known as China's Horse County. It is not only famous for its lily horses, but one of the best breeds in the country, but also for its extensive horse industry. CGTN's Chu Huyao paid a visit to the county to feel the culture of the horses. Let's take a look.
Man and horse gallop freely across the river, a life they have lived for centuries.
This is perhaps one of the most spectacular scenes you will encounter in Zhaosu County. It is home to the so-called Tianma, which in English means the heavenly horses. Now, this legendary name was a product of an exchange from some 2,000 years ago.
It was given by Han Wudi, an emperor from the Han Dynasty, who regarded the horses as assets.
The reputation of the Yili horses is that they're easy to breed. They can survive any tough conditions.
It'll be quite difficult to find anyone who loves horses more than this guy, a 38-year-old ethnic Kazakh. Growing up with horses, he says horses are loyal and brave. His love for the animal led him to quit his job and become a full-time horse breeder.
They're all I think about. My love for horses started in my childhood. My dad made me draw the animal to quiet me down. When I grew up, I started raising horses on my own.
Over the last decade, he has raised over 40 horses in this village. His income comes from selling them to horse clubs and film crews. but he would not sell those he has special connection with. Some 50 kilometers away is the biggest racecourse in the county. San Kewen, an ethnic Mongolian woman who races there, shares a similar passion for horses.
I used to be a ticket taker at this course. I watched people practice and race all the time. And one day I thought, why not try it myself?
Racing is a dangerous sport. When she first started, she'd fall off the horses all the time. That worried her parents, and it's why her mom never comes to watch her race.
I could never give up my horses. I enjoy the sport so much. It's hard to describe the feeling of riding freely with my horses for hundreds of kilometers.
She says horses are her companions, her friends, and even like her children. A mom herself, she takes good care of her horses, feeding them sugar and giving them baths every day. From horse breeding to racing, Zhaosu has become famous for its well-developed horse industry. The progress is felt by both televoz in San Kewen.
Lots of companies are now sponsoring our races. This gives us breeders more confidence for the future.
As a racer, I can feel Ely horses getting stronger and faster. I think it has to do with better hybrid breeding.
Heavenly horses riding on this beautiful grassland. They know there's great potential ahead for China's horse county.
All right, let's now remind you of some of our top stories making headlines. The UN is celebrating its 75th anniversary at the General Assembly session this Monday. Speeches are expected from world leaders as well as Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The event will be a little different this year as the summit will take place online. Libya is preparing to resume oil production, but concerns have been raised over who supervises the export and how to ensure oil revenue will be divided equally among different factions. Rival forces split between the east and west of the country have been battling for control of the vital resource. And a U.S. federal judge has blocked the U.S. government's ban on WeChat, citing free speech in her ruling. The popular Chinese-owned messaging and e-commerce app was scheduled to stop operating in the U.S. on Sunday. And that is a wrap of some of the top stories making headlines across Africa. Let's take a look at our business headlines coming up. The international price of crude oil drops as Libya prepares to resume oil production. And Ethiopia commends the successful construction and operation of the standard gauge railway through Djibouti.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Time now for our business segment. Thanks for sticking with us. Oil prices fell on Monday on the potential return of output from Libya. Brent crude was down 0.8% to trade at $42.82 at a barrel by 0645 GMT, while U.S. crude was down 0.9% to trade at $40.73 a barrel. Workers at Libya's major Sahara field have restarted operations after National Oil Corporation announced a partial lifting of force majeure. There is also concern that rising cases of the coronavirus may push down demand. More than 30 million people have been infected by the virus, and over 954,800 have died globally, paralyzing travel and business activity. Ethiopia's transport minister has commended the successful construction and operation of the Ethiopia-Djibouti standard gauge railway. The electrified line is the first trans-boundary railway on the African continent. CGTN's Asta Tal has the details.
The 756-kilometer electrified railway is the first trans-boundary railway on the African continent. It connects Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, to the Red Sea port in Djibouti. Contracted to 2 Chinese companies, the Ethio-Djibouti electrified railway has been playing an increasingly important role in facilitating the transportation of people and goods between the 2 countries.
Together, we accomplished a very significant task of construction of about 756 kilometers of railway line with major relevant infrastructure, rolling stocks and facilities, and the system was made open to operation since January 2018.
The Ethio-Djibouti electrified railway has already cut the transport time for goods from 7 days to less than 20 hours. It has also reduced the cost by at least 1/3 since commencing operations nearly 2 years ago. Presently, it provides different kinds of freight services, including the transport of perishable goods, vehicles, cereals, and fertilizers.
There are 13 countries in the world with a population size larger than 100 million. And you might have noticed that Ethiopia is the only one with no coastline and seaport. This is the major bottleneck for the development of Ethiopia. And 95% of the trade of Ethiopia goes through Djibouti.
Djibouti is important to landlocked Ethiopia, which currently imports and exports nearly 90% of its goods through its ports. For Ethiopia, the dream is that one day this railway will extend from Djibouti's coast all the way across Africa to the Atlantic Ocean. Asta Tal, CGTN.
Tunisia has clinched the Best Organization Award at the International Tourism Industry Expo in Guangzhou, China. The North African nation aims to make inroads into the lucrative Southeast Asian travel and tourism market. From Tunis, here is CGTN's Adnan Zhaosu.
Tunisia's gross tourism industry is betting on the recent promotional success in China, where it won a prestigious award for a quick rebound following the downturn caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Tunisia's embassy in Beijing, the award was granted to the Tunisian pavilion in recognition of its distinction in terms of design and positive interaction with the visitors of the expo in China.
This is indeed very good news amid the stagnation of the tourism sector in the world. The best tourism exhibitions are still taking place in China. Boosting cooperation between Tunisian and Chinese professionals is a top priority.
The managing director of the National Office of the Tunisian Tourism added that the region of Guangzhou, south of China, is one of the most vibrant cities in the world. Therefore, winning an award in Guangzhou opens the door to new opportunities for tourism stakeholders in Tunisia and China.
Guangzhou is an exceptional destination. The National Office of the Tunisian Tourism has increased its promotion campaigns in the region to attract Chinese travelers who are very open to discovering North Africa with its beautiful nature, historic sites, and museums and culture.
Munir bin Milad is an international tourism expert. He is familiar with China's tourism industry.
Unlike in the rest of the world, exhibitions, fairs and international events are still taking place in China. Production is back and the economy will return to normal soon. These positive factors will encourage tourists from China to travel after the pandemic. Tunisia is ready to welcome them.
This 9th edition of the China International Tourism Industry Expo saw a strong participation of professionals, tour operators and visitors who voiced willingness to ensure the resumption of leisure and tourism activities in the next few months. According to the National Office of the Tunisian Tourism, an intensive promotion campaign for the Tunisian destination was launched by the Tunisian Embassy in China through adverts on the screens of Beijing International Airport. The campaign aims to attract more Chinese travelers to the North African destination. Abdel Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The Chinese embassy in Burkina Faso, together with the Center for the Analysis of Economic and Social Policies, are seeking ways to help Burkina Faso recover from the effects of the coronavirus. Burkina Faso is currently experiencing a second wave of COVID-19 related contamination since the beginning of September. The number of confirmed cases in Burkina Faso currently stands at just over 1,800 with 56 deaths. During the meeting, China reaffirmed its desire to continue supporting Burkina Faso in line with Beijing's commitment to make its vaccine against COVID-19 available to its African partners. China and Burkina Faso resumed their bilateral relationship in May 2018, and since then, this collaboration has continued to intensify.
When we look at the trade relations between Burkina Faso and China, overall 60 to 70% of imports of materials essential for production come from China. And despite COVID-19, about 60% of imports still come from China, which means that trade relations between China and Burkina Faso are at a very high level. Overall, we see that China, in 2 years of cooperation, has done better than other countries with which we have been cooperating for more than 20 years.
COVID-19 has had a negative impact on our economy, but it is a challenge. We need to be able to revive our economy, put in place a strategy and a recovery plan. And right now, we need our partners, particularly China, to help us meet the challenge on health issues related to COVID-19 and economic challenges.
We have organized this conference to collect views of focus groups and gather opinions of our Burkinabe friends in different fields in order to better understand their needs. In this way, the ideas can help us to improve our cooperation in future. China has helped Burkina Faso in the past, and we will continue to do so, especially in the area of COVID-19, which has been a very dominant area in Sino-Burkinabe cooperation since the beginning of the year.
And we are not done just yet. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more news stories. Here's a look at the headline. We look at efforts to revive Egypt's tourism sector amid fears of a slump in international arrivals.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for sticking with us. Let's turn our attention to Egypt, where Egypt says it is making every effort to reassure tourists about their safety and encourage them to visit in the hope that the tourism sector revives gradually. Since the country reopened in July, hotels and resorts are operating at below half capacity and major sites remain virtually empty. The European Union is also yet to add Egypt to its safe travel list.
The pyramids of Giza in Egypt are one of the world's most recognizable tourist attractions, but today they stand lonely, with just over a handful of tourists walking among the ancient wonders.
This virus came about and ruined everything. There was tourism and things operating when things were good. After that, all has become what you now see. Total ruin.
Back in the day, we used to get many tourists. Numbers were quite high. We used to get Germans, Americans, Italians, Chinese, and Japanese, English. Now none of those come here.
That could be bad news for the economy. Tourism accounts for up to 15% of Egypt's national output. Officials said it was losing around $1 billion each month after the sector all but shut down from March as the coronavirus pandemic struck. Egypt has now resumed international flights and reopened tourist spots. Officials say tourist sites and hotels are subject to strict controls.
I really think that we cannot sit and wait until this virus will be completely finished. But you can come and you can be protected because you can enjoy the magic and you touch the pyramid and you follow the mummies coming from Cairo Museum to go to the Civilization Museum.
And we started looking for countries where we could stop. And there were all of the countries were almost closed. And we saw that Egypt opened on August. So we were very happy.
But even so, officials, hotel owners and tour guides concede that the key winter season starting in October is going to be tough. The state has moved to protect the sector with emergency funding. More than 9,000 registered tour guides will receive $32 monthly till the end of the year. Chamrono, CGTN.
And in Angola, churches in the capital Luanda have reopened to worshipers this month. That's after places of worship were forced to shut down 6 months ago due to the coronavirus outbreak. Tuli Shabalala has more on that story.
Thousands of Angolan Christians attended church services in Luanda on Sunday. This is their first service since coronavirus restrictions were lifted.
6 months later. Oh yes, it's been a long time, especially for us Christians. It seems like 5-6 years have passed, not 6 months. We are finally here to celebrate our immense joy.
At least 3,000 worshippers gathered at churches across the capital. In efforts to maintain physical distancing, worshippers sat on chairs spaced about a meter apart, with some services held in the open air.
We celebrate this with a big commemoration. As we can't enter the church, we have gathered outside to avoid catching COVID-19. It's a great idea to be outside and nothing will stop us from praying. Whether it rains or snows, we will pray.
The service lasted 90 minutes, much shorter than the traditional 5 hours.
Because of the coronavirus pandemic, and thanks be to God, it is a great day to reopen our worship services and we celebrate this with our God. But we must finally show our people how to behave in the face of this situation. You heard my message during the prayer. Let us not panic, but let us have courage and strength.
Religious gatherings were banned in March when Angola's government imposed restrictions to help curb the spread of the coronavirus. The virus has infected more than 3,900 people in Angola and killed at least 115. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And do not go away. We've got your sports news coming up next. Here's a look at the headline. In sports, nail-biting climax of the South African Premier League gives fans a reason to smile.